Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Now, most podcasts put their promotion and cap-rattling stuff halfway through or towards the end. But because if everything goes well, you're going to be asleep long before we get there, I need to put this business stuff up front. This show is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. I'm hearing from people all the time how valuable they find the show, and those supporters who have the means and are able to and want to help fund the show to keep it going and helping to reach new audiences are much appreciated. I have a new patron, Dottie, who signed up recently. Thank you very much, Dottie. Your help is very much appreciated, and here's to many more well-rested nights. And if you would like to join Dottie and the other patrons and supporting the show, and you have the means to do so comfortably, please check out patreon.com/sleepytimetales, or you can even go patron.sleepytimetales.net at the link in the show notes, or from the website to see what you can get as a supporter. There are real rewards available from as little as $2 a month, over and above the knowledge that you're doing what you can to help thousands of fellow insomniacs to get a good night's sleep. Other methods of support are listed in the show notes as well. If a monthly contribution is a bit much, there's the Patreon, the tip jar, the merchandise store, and a couple of others. Incidentally, I just want to mention there's what I think is a very nice new mug design up on the merchandise store. So take a look at that. At store.sleepytimetales.net. It's got the little sleepy star and the logo on a starfield background, which is quite pretty. It's the one I use for the feed at the moment. I hacked it together from a bunch of other graphics, but it turned out quite nicely. So take a look. It might be a nice one for your collection. And also there's another huge way that you can help the show, and that's just to spread the word. If there is someone in your life who you think will benefit from listening to Sleepy Time Tales, just let them know. If you recommend the show on social media, please make sure to tag me in so that I know and I can thank you. That's at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter. And I think also recommendations on Facebook go quite well, so you can find the Facebook page there, Sleepy Time Tales Podcast, and make recommendations from there too. I know quite a few people have recommended to their family, and family members have started listening, so that's pretty cool. And last thing for tonight, I'm going to have to give a shout out to the music. The song is Un Désert by Kumiko. Their music is available on the Free Music Archive, and I've linked their website in the show notes, as they've got some very cool stuff that they release under various names that I recommend taking a look at. Thank you for taking the time, and back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? It's a bit of a strange idea, isn't it? A podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night with your mind spinning and your emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself just not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. I'm someone who has always struggled to sleep. When I was a baby, I gave my parents sleepless nights for years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, sleep really was always a struggle for me. Was a struggle for me for literally decades until in my 30s I discovered that when I used to lie in bed at night and listen to podcasts because I was going to be lying awake all night, I'd suddenly find myself waking up having missed everything I was trying to listen to. that was how I discovered the tendency for droning voices, especially male ones, to act almost like a tranquilizer for me. I listened to podcasts sometime eventually specifically for the purpose of helping me to sleep. And while that worked, I also discovered that there were others out there actually specifically intended for the purpose. I tried out a show or two and they worked very well for me, and I recommended them to other people. But for various reasons, they often didn't resonate with others. Often it was the narrator's voice or choice of story or something like that. And I thought to myself, I'm a guy with a boring, droning voice, so maybe I can help those people that the existing podcasters, sleep podcasters already can't. And so I started up Sleepy Time Tales, and it's going very nicely, and I've got a definite core of people who find the show very helpful for them. Now, every episode of the show starts with this long intro. It's here for a couple of reasons, and despite the fact that it's actually the thing that gets the most complaints, it's never going to go anywhere because, firstly, I need to explain to new listeners what the show is for. I need to explain the concept behind it, which I've done so far, and how I think it's helpful for people to engage with. And for people who've been around for a while, obviously they know what works for them. And what part of what works for them is the fact that this long intro goes on. It's generally pretty much the same thing over and over again, although I redo it fresh every week. I don't just copy and paste it. So it's broadly similar, but a little bit fresh. And it becomes sort of part of their process. This is the time where you get your space ready and you turn your lights out and make sure your room is in a comfortable temperature. Make it warm, but not too warm. A slightly cooler environment actually does help you sleep, incidentally. But wrap yourself nicely in your blanket so you can modulate your temperature as you need to and stay comfortable as you need to. Brush your teeth, have a glass of water, that sort of thing. A lot of people are asleep, particularly long-time listeners. A lot of people are asleep by the time we get to the story. If you're here for an exciting storytelling, this is not the place for you. Hopefully, if all goes well, you will never hear this story. And basically that's it. What we're doing here is we're trying to build a space together, a sort of nest that you can settle into and help you sleep. As I said, I also sort of have a couple of theories of different ways where people engage with the show. And if you've got something different, please feel free to let me know. But the two primary ways, I think, is that for me, when I listen to my sleep podcasts, I need something that I can actually listen to, something that I can actually engage with and follow along with, because I need to keep my mind on something specific so that I don't resist sleep and spin out into stress when it comes for me. For other people, it may be something a little bit more primal. White noise generators and that sort of thing are becoming a big thing now, and you may need white noise, you may need the sound of the ocean, you may need rain or the wind in the trees, or you may just need some boring dude telling you a boring story. Speaking of stories, tonight's is actually a classic. I usually try to find slightly unusual historical novels and short story collections to read, but I thought tonight I'm going to go for something very well known, and if you've seen the title of the episode, it's not going to be a surprise that it's Little Women by Louisa M. Alcott. I picked Little Women this week because there has recently been a new movie version, which apparently is excellent. I haven't gotten around to it. I did watch one when I was much younger, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, despite being quite young. And when you're a young boy, you don't really like girl things. But I do remember really enjoying the movie that I saw. If I remember correctly, it had Winona Ryder in it. Or I may be misremembering. I may be just being an idiot. I probably should have researched it before I started talking. And also recently saw a video essay by movie critic Lindsay Ellis talking about Little Women and the adaptations of it, which I'm also going to link in the show notes because Lindsay has a lot of very fantastic stuff, and discovering her on YouTube has helped me get through long periods of lockdown. And anyway, that's that. That's what we're talking about tonight. Whatever the story is, though, whether it's me waffling or the tale of a group of young women trying to make their way in the world, the main thing is I'm here to help you to sleep, but the important thing is you don't try to force it. Just keep a light mental grip on the story and the thread of my voice, and allow sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it is very important you don't feel pressurized. This may not work on your first night. It may take a few nights for you to get used to listening to my voice. Maybe my accent is a little bit strange to you. Maybe one episode just isn't long enough. What I do with my sleep podcast is I have a whole bunch downloaded, more than enough to keep me going for a whole night. And I just start on the latest episode and I let them autoplay and run through. Because I actually go to sleep okay these days, but what happens to me is I wake up at 3 a.m. and I sort of don't quite realize I am awake, and then I realize I've been awake for over an hour and sort of not haven't managed to fall back asleep. So what I just do is I pop my earbuds back in as soon as I'm conscious of being semi-awake, if they're not still in already, and I'll waft back to sleep. Sometimes even what happens with me is I wake up 30 minutes or 60 minutes before my alarm, and I do the same thing. I just treat it as if I've woken up in the middle of the night and go back to sleep again. And it may sound strange to you, why bother to go back to sleep when you're going to be up in an hour or half an hour? And the fact is, I often find that that's sometimes the best part of the night for me. There's just something about allowing yourself deep relaxation at that point, right before the alarm, that's just satisfying in a way very little other sleep is. And it's something I've had people send me messages to sort of thank me for recommending that they do that, because it works for more than just me, so I'm not completely mad. But whether you're going to sleep at night and struggling to give in to sleep, or you're waking up in the middle of the night, or the last thing late in the morning, it is very important that you just try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange, so give it a chance. I recommend giving the Sleepy Time Tales a solid 3 nights try. If you're not sleeping by the end of the 3rd night, then maybe this isn't for you, but there may be something else out there for you. And I would apply the same advice to pretty much any other show that you listen to as well. If you're listening to Sleep With Me or Boring Books for Bedtime or Nothing Much Happens, I wouldn't expect it to work in the first night, because we're trying to create habits here. We're trying to replace the bad habit of insomnia with the good habit of just being able to sleep. And that can take time. So there's the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you relax, to improve your life in a small way, or maybe not so small. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes their lives harder. So I'm here to do my small part to help you in a big way, to help you to face tomorrow and the day after well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in the benefits of kindness. I'm doing this show because I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. But even more important, I need you to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get yourself over the edge of sleep, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep, and one of the points of this podcast, the intentions of it, is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact that you can't sleep and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep and to a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy. But it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life, and supposed progress shining bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Chapter 1. Playing Pilgrims. Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents, grumbled Joe, lying on the rug. It's so dreadful to be poor, sighed Meg, looking down at her old dress. I don't think it's fair for some girls to have plenty of pretty things and other girls nothing at all, added little Amy with an injured sniff. We've got father and mother and each other, said Beth contentedly from her corner. The 4 young faces on which the firelight shone brightened at the cheerful words, but darkened again as Joe said sadly, We haven't got father, and shall not have him for a long time. She didn't say perhaps never, but each silently added it, thinking of father far away and where the fighting was. Nobody spoke for a minute. Then Meg said in an altered tone, You know the reason Mother proposed not having any presents this Christmas was because it is going to be a hard winter for everyone. And she thinks we ought not to spend money for pleasure when our men are suffering so in the army. We can't do much, but we can make our little sacrifices and ought to do it gladly. But I'm afraid I don't. And Meg shook her head as she thought regretfully of all the pretty things she wanted. But I don't think the little we should spend would do any good. We've each got $1, and the army won't be much helped by our giving that. I agree not to expect anything from Mother or you, but I do want to buy Undine and Cintron for myself. I've wanted it so long, said Joe, who was a bookworm. I plan to spend mine in new music, said Beth, with a little sigh, which no one heard, but the hearth-brush and the kettle holder. I shall get a nice box of Faber's drawing pencils. I really need them, said Amy decidedly. Mother didn't say anything about our money, and she won't wish us to give up everything. Let's each buy what we want and have a little fun. I'm sure we work hard enough to earn it, cried Joe, examining the heels of her shoes in a gentlemanly manner. I know I do, teaching these tiresome children nearly all day when I'm longing to enjoy myself at home, began Meg in the complaining tone again. You don't have half such a hard time as I do, said Joe. How would you like to shut up for hours with a nervous, fussy old lady who keeps you trotting, is never satisfied, and worries you till you're ready to fly out the window or cry? It's naughty to fret, but I do think washing dishes and keeping things tidy is the worst work in the world. It makes me cross and my hands get so stiff I can't practice well at all. And Beth looked at her rough hands with a sigh that anyone could hear that time. I don't believe any of you suffer as I do, cried Amy, for you don't have to go to school with impertinent girls who plague you if you don't know your lessons and laugh at your dresses, and label your father if he isn't rich, and insult you when your nose isn't nice. If you mean libel, I'd say so, and not talk about labels, as if Papa was a pickle bottle, advised Joe, laughing. I know what I mean, and you needn't be satirical about it. It's proper to use good words and improve your vocabulary, returned Amy with dignity. Don't peck at one another, children. Don't you wish we had the money Papa lost when we were little, Joe? Dear me, how happy and good we'd be if we had no worries, said Meg, who could remember better times. You said the other day you thought we were a deal happier than the king's children, for they were fighting and fretting all the time in spite of their money. So I did, Beth. Well, I think we are. For though we do have to work, we make fun of ourselves and are pretty jolly set, as Joe would say. Joe does use such slang words, observed Amy, with a reproving look at the long figure stretched out on the rug. Joe immediately sat up, put her hands in her pockets, and began to whistle. Don't, Joe, it's so boyish. That's why I do it. I detest rude, unladylike girls. I hate affected niminy-piminy chits. Birds in their little nests agree, sang Beth, the peacemaker, with such a funny face that both sharp voice and softened to a laugh, and the pecking ended for that time. Really, girls, you are both to be blamed, said Meg, beginning to lecture in her elderly Sicily fashion. You are old enough to leave off boyish tricks and behave better, Josephine. It didn't matter so much when you were a little girl, but now you are so tall and turn up your hair, you should remember that you are a young lady. I'm not, and if turning up my hair makes me one, I'll wear it in 2 tails till I'm 20, cried Joe, pulling off her net and shaking down a chestnut mane. I hate to think I've got to grow up and be Miss March and wear long gowns and look as prim as a China aster. It's bad enough to be a girl anyway when I like boys' games and work and manners. I can't get over my disappointment in not being a boy, and it's worse than ever now, for I'm dying to go and fight with Papa, and I can only stay home and knit like a poky old woman. And Joe shook the blue army sock till the needles rattled like castanets and her ball bounded across the room. Poor Joe. It's too bad, but it can't be helped. So you must try to be contented with making your name boyish and playing brother to us girls, said Beth, stroking the rough head with a gentle hand that all the dishwashing and dusting in the world could not make ungentle in its touch. As for you, Amy, continued Meg, you are altogether too particular and prim. Your airs are funny now, but you'll grow up an affected little goose if you don't take care. I like your nice manners and refined ways of speaking when you don't try to be elegant, but your absurd words are as bad as Joe's slang. If Joe is a tomboy and Amy a goose, what am I, please? Asked Beth, ready to share the lecture. You're a dear and nothing else, answered Meg warmly, and no one contradicted her, for the mouse was the pet of the family. As young readers like to know how people look, we will take this moment to give them a little sketch of the 4 sisters who sat knitting away in the twilight, while the December snows fell quietly without and the fire crackled cheerfully within. It was a comfortable room, though the carpet was faded and the furniture very plain, for a good picture or two hung on the walls, books filled with the recesses, chrysanthemums and Christmas roses bloomed in the windows, and a pleasant atmosphere of home peace pervaded it. Margaret, the eldest of the 4, was 16 and very pretty, being plump and fair with large eyes, plenty of soft brown hair, a sweet mouth and white hands of which she was rather vain. 15-year-old Joe was very tall, thin and brown, and reminded one of a colt, for she never seemed to know what to do with her long limbs, which were very much in her way. She had a decided mouth, a comical nose, and sharp grey eyes which appeared to see everything, and were by turns fierce, funny, or thoughtful. Her long, thick hair was her one beauty, but was usually bundled into a net to be out of her way. Round shoulders had Joe, big hands and feet, a flyaway look to her clothes, and the uncomfortable appearance of a girl who was rapidly shooting up into a woman and didn't like it. Elizabeth, or Beth as everyone called her, was a rosy, smooth-haired, bright-eyed girl of 13, with a shy manner, a timid voice, and a peaceful expression which was seldom disturbed. Her father called her Little Miss Tranquillity, and the name suited her excellently, for she seemed to live in a happy world of her own, only venturing out to meet the few whom she trusted and loved. Amy, though the youngest, was a most important person, in her own opinion at least. A regular snow maiden with blue eyes and yellow hair curling on her shoulders, pale and slender and always carrying herself like a young lady mindful of her manners. What the characters of the four sisters were, we will leave to be found out. The clock struck 6, and having swept up the hearth, Beth put out a pair of slippers down to warm. Somehow the sight of the old shoes had a good effect upon the girls, for Mother was coming, and everyone brightened to welcome her. Meg stopped lecturing and lighted the lamp. Amy got out of the easy chair without being asked, and Jo forgot how tired she was as she sat up to hold the slippers nearer to the blaze. They are quite worn out. Mummy must have a new pair. I thought I'd get her some with my dollar, said Beth. No, I shall, cried Amy. I'm the oldest, began Meg, but Jo cut in with a decided, I'm the man of the family now Papa is away, and I shall provide the slippers, for he told me to take special care of Mother while he was gone. I'll tell you what we'll do, said Beth. Let's each get her something for Christmas and not get anything for ourselves. That's like you, dear. What will we get? Exclaimed Jo. Everyone thought soberly for a minute, then Meg announced, as if the idea was suggested by the sight of her own pretty hands, I shall give her a nice pair of gloves. Army shoes, best to be had, cried Jo. Some handkerchiefs all hemmed, said Beth. I'll get a little bottle of cologne. She likes it, and it won't cost much, so I'll have some left to buy my pencils, added Amy. How will we give the things? Asked Meg. Put them on the table and bring her in and see her open the bundles. Don't you remember how we used to do on our birthdays? Answered Jo. I used to be so frightened when it was my turn to sit in the chair with a crown on and see you all come marching round to give the presents with a kiss. I liked the things and the kisses, but it was dreadful to have you sitting looking at me while I opened the bundles, said Beth, who was toasting her face and the bread for tea at the same time. Let Mommy think we are getting things for ourselves and then surprise her. We must go shopping tomorrow afternoon, Meg. There is so much to do about the play for Christmas night, said Jo, marching up and down with her hands behind her back and her nose in the air. I don't mean to act any more after this time. I'm getting too old for such things, observed Meg, who was as much a child as ever about the dressing up frolics. You won't stop. I know. As long as you can trail around in a white gown with your hair down and wear paper gold jewelry. You're the best actress we've got, and there'll be an end of everything if you quit the board, said Jo. We ought to rehearse tonight. Come here, Amy, and do the fainting scene, for you're as stiff as a poker in that. I can't help it. I never saw anyone faint, and I don't choose to make myself all black and blue tumbling flat as you do. If I can go down easily, I'll drop. If I can't, I shall fall into a chair and be graceful. I don't care if Hugo does come at me with a pistol, returned Amy, who was not gifted with dramatic power, but was chosen because she was small enough to be borne out shrieking by the villain of the piece. Do it this way. Clasp your hands so and stagger across the room, crying frantically, Rodrigo, save me, save me, and away went Jo, with a melodramatic scream which was truly thrilling. Amy followed, but she poked her hands out stiffly before her and jerked herself along as if she was went by machinery, and her owl was more suggestive of pins being run into her than of fear and anguish. Jo gave a despairing groan and Meg laughed outright, while Beth let her bread burn as she watched the fun with interest. It's no use. Do the best you can when the time comes, and if the audience laughs, don't blame me. Come on, Meg. Then things went smoothly, for Don Pedro defied the world in a speech of 2 pages without a single break. Hagar the witch chanted an awful incantation of a kettle full of simmering toads, with weird effect. Rodrigo rent his chains asunder manfully, and Hugo died in agonies of remorse and arsenic with a wild ha, ha. It's the best we've had yet, said Meg, as the dead villain sat up and rubbed his elbows. I don't see how you can write and act such splendid things, Jo. You're regular Shakespeare, exclaimed Beth, who firmly believed that her sister was gifted with wonderful genius in all things. Not quite, replied Joe modestly. I do think the witch's curse and operatic tragedy is rather a nice thing, but I'd like to try Macbeth if we only had a trapdoor for Banquo. I always wanted to do the killing part. Is that a dagger I see before me? Muttered Jo, rolling her eyes and clutching at the air as she had seen a famous tragedian do. No, it's the toasting fork, with Mother's shoe on it instead of the bread. Beth stage struck, cried Meg, and the rehearsal ended with a general burst of laughter. Glad to find you so merry, my girls, said a cheerful voice at the door, and actors and audience turned to welcome a tall, motherly lady with a "can I help you" look about her, which was truly delightful. She was not elegantly dressed, but a noble-looking woman, and the girls thought the grey cloak and unfashionable bonnet covered the most splendid mother in the world. Well, dearies, how have you got on today? There was so much to do getting the boxes ready to go tomorrow that I didn't come home to dinner. Has anyone called Beth? How is your cold, Meg? Jo, you look tired to death. Come and kiss me, baby. While making these maternal inquiries, Mrs. March got her wet things off, her warm slippers on, and sitting down in the easy chair, drew Amy to her lap, preparing to enjoy the happiest hour of her busy day. The girls flew about, trying to make things comfortable, each in her own way. Meg arranged the tea table, Jo brought wood and set chairs, dropping, overturning, and clattering everything she touched. Beth trotted to and fro between parlour, kitchen, quiet and busy, while Amy gave directions to everyone as she sat with her hands folded. As they gathered about the table, Mrs. March said with a pleasantly happy face, I've got a treat for you after supper. A quick bright smile went around like a streak of sunshine. Beth clasped her hands, regardless of the biscuit she held, and Jo tossed up her napkin, crying, a letter, 3 cheers for father. Yes, a nice long letter. He is well and thinks he shall get through the cold season better than we feared. He sends all sorts of loving wishes for Christmas, and in a special message to you girls, said Mrs. March, patting her pocket as if she'd got a treasure there. Hurry and get done. Don't stop to quirk your little finger and simper over your plate, Amy, cried Jo, choking on her tea and dropping her bread, butter side down on the carpet in her haste to get at the treat. Beth ate no more, but crept away to sit in her shadowy corner and brood over the delight to come, till the others were ready. I think it was so splendid in father to go as chaplain when he was too old to be drafted, and not strong enough for a soldier, said Meg warmly. Don't I wish I could go as a drummer, a vivan, what's his name, or a nurse, so I could be near him and help him, exclaimed Jo with a groan. It must be very disagreeable to sleep in a tent and eat all sorts of bad-tasting things and drink out of a tin mug, sighed Amy. When will he come home, Mommy? Asked Beth, with a little quiver in her voice. Not for many months, dear, unless he is sick. He will stay and do his work faithfully as long as he can, and we won't ask for him back at a minute sooner than he can be spared. Now come and hear the letter. They all drew to the fire, Mother in the big chair with Beth at her feet, Meg and Amy perched on either arm of the chair and Jo leaning on the back where no one could see any sign of emotion if the letter should happen to be touching. Very few letters were written in those hard times that were not touching, especially those which father sent home. In this one little was said of the hardships endured, the dangers faced, or the homesickness conquered. It was a cheerful, hopeful letter full of lively descriptions of camp life, marches, and military news, and only at the end did the writer's heart overflow with fatherly love and longing for the little girls at home. Give them all of my dear love and a kiss. Tell them I think of them by day, pray for them by night, and find my best comfort in their affection at all times. A year seems very long to wait before I see them, but remind them that while we wait, we may all work, so that these hard days need not be wasted. I know they will remember all I said to them, and that they will be loving children to you, will do their duty faithfully, fight their bosom enemies bravely, and conquer themselves so beautifully that when I come back to them I may be fonder and prouder than ever of my little women. Everybody sniffed when they came to that part. Jo wasn't ashamed of the great tear that dropped off the end of her nose, and Amy never minded the rumpling of her curls as she hid her face on her mother's shoulder and sobbed out. I'm a selfish girl, but I'll truly try to be better so you mightn't be disappointed in me by and by. We all will, cried Meg. I think too much of my looks and hate to work, but won't any more if I can help it. I'll try and be what he loves to call me, a little woman, and not be rough and wild, but do my duty here instead of wanting to be somewhere else, said Jo, thinking that keeping her temper at home was a much harder task than facing a rebel or two down south. Beth said nothing but wiped away her tears with the blue army sock and began to knit with all her might, losing no time in doing the duty that lay nearest to her, while she resolved in a quiet little soul to be all that father hoped to find her when the year brought round the happy coming home. Mrs. March broke the silence that followed Jo's words by saying in a cheery voice, Do you remember how you used to play Pilgrim's Progress when you were little things? Nothing delighted you more than to have me stick my piece bags on your backs for burdens, give you hats and sticks and rolls of paper and let you travel through the house from the cellar, which was the city of destruction, up to the housetop, where you had all the lovely things you could collect to make a celestial city. What fun it was, especially going by the lions, fighting Apollyon, and passing through the valley where the hobgoblins were, said Jo. I like the places where the bundles fell off and tumbled downstairs, said Meg. I don't remember much about it, except that I was afraid of the cellar and the dark entry, and always liked the cake and milk we had up at the top. If I wasn't too old for such things, I'd rather like to play it over again, said Amy, who began to talk of renouncing child things at the mature age of 12. We never are too old for this, my dear, because it is a play we are playing all the time in one way or another. Our burdens are here, our road is before us, and the longing for goodness and happiness is the guide that leads us through many troubles and mistakes to the place which is a true celestial city. Now, my little pilgrims, suppose you begin again, not in play but in earnest, and see how far you can get before father comes home. Really, mother, where are our bundles? Asked Amy, who was a very literal young lady. Each of you told what your burden was just now, except Beth. I rather think she hasn't got any, said her mother. Yes, I have. Mine is dishes and dusters and envying girls with nice pianos and being afraid of people. Beth's bundle was such a funny one that everyone wanted to laugh, but nobody did, for it would have hurt her feelings very much. Let us do it, said Meg thoughtfully. There's only another name for trying to be good, and the story may help us, for though we do want to be good, it's hard work, and we forget and don't do our best. We were in the slough of despond tonight, and Mother came and pulled us out, as Help did in the book. We ought to have our roll of directions like Christian. What shall we do about that? Asked Jo, delighted with the fancy which lent little romance to the very dull task of doing her duty. Look under your pillows Christmas morning and you will find your guidebook, replied Mrs. March. They talked over the new plan while old Hannah cleared the table. Then out came the 4 little work baskets, and the needles flew as the girls made sheets for Aunt March. It was uninteresting sewing, but tonight no one grumbled. They adopted Jo's plan of dividing the long seams into 4 parts and calling the quarters Europe, Asia, Africa, and America, and in that way got on capitally, especially when they talked about the different countries as they stitched their way through them. At 9 they stopped work and sang, as usual, before they went out to bed. No one but Beth could get much music out of the old piano, but she had a way of softly touching the yellow keys and making a pleasant accompaniment to the simple songs they sang. Meg had a voice like a flute, and she and her mother led the little choir. Amy chirped like a cricket, and Jo wandered through the airs at her own sweet will, always coming out at the wrong place with a croak or a quaver that spoiled the most pensive tune. They had always done this from the time they could lisp, "Crinkle, crinkle, little star," and had become a household custom, for the mother was a born singer. The first sound in the morning was her voice as she went about the house singing like a lark, and the last sound at night was the same cheery sound, for the girls never grew too old for a familiar lullaby. Chapter 2. A Merry Christmas. Jo was the first to wake in the grey dawn of Christmas morning. No stockings hung at the fireplace, and for a moment she felt as much disappointed as she did long ago, when her little sock fell down because it was so crammed full of goodies. Then she remembered her mother's promise, and slipping her hand under her pillow, drew out a little crimson-covered book. She knew it very well, for it was that beautiful old story of the best life ever lived, and Jo felt that it was a true guidebook for any pilgrim going on a long journey. She woke Meg with a Merry Christmas and bade her see what was under her pillow. A green-covered book appeared, with the same picture inside and a few words written by their mother, which made their one present very precious in their eyes. Presently, Beth and Amy woke to rummage and find their little books also, one dove-coloured, the other blue, and all sat looking at and talking about them while the east grew rosy with the coming day. In spite of her small vanities, Margaret had a sweet and pious nature which unconsciously influenced her sisters, especially Jo, who loved her very tenderly, and obeyed her because her advice was so gently given. "Girls," said Meg seriously, looking from the tumbled head beside her to the two little night-capped ones in the room beyond. "Mother wants us to read and love and mind these books, and we must begin at once. We used to be faithful about it, but since Father went away and all this war trouble unsettled us, we have neglected many things. You can do as you please, but I shall keep my book on the table here and read a little every morning, as soon as I wake, for I know it will do me good and help me through the day." Then she opened her new book and began to read. Jo put her arm around her and, leaning cheek to cheek, read also, with the quiet expression so seldom seen on her restless face. "How good Meg is. Come, Amy, let's do as they do. I'll help you with the hard words and they'll explain things if we don't understand," whispered Beth, very much impressed by the pretty books and her sister's example. "I'm glad mine is blue," said Amy, and then the rooms were very still while the pages were softly turned, and the winter sunshine crept in to touch the bright heads and serious faces with a Christmas greeting. "Where is Mother?" asked Meg, as she and Jo ran down to thank her for their gifts, half an hour later. "Goodness only knows. Some poor creature came a-begging, and your ma went straight off to see what was needed. There never was such a woman for giving away victuals and drink, clothes and firing," replied Hannah, who had lived with the family since Meg was born and was considered by them all more as a friend than a servant. "She will be back soon, I think, to fry your cakes and have everything ready," said Meg, looking over the presents which were collected in a basket and kept under the sofa, ready to be produced at the proper time. "Why, where is Amy's bottle of cologne?" she asked, as the little flask did not appear. "She took it out a minute ago and went off with it to put a ribbon on it or some such notion," replied Jo, dancing about the room to take the first stiffness off the new army slippers. "How nice my handkerchiefs look, don't they? Hannah washed and ironed them for me, and I marked them all myself," said Beth, looking proudly at the somewhat uneven letters which had cost her much labor. "Bless the child. She's gone and put Mother on them instead of M. March. How funny," cried Jo, taking one up. "Isn't that right? I thought better to do so, because Meg's initials are MM, and I don't want anyone to use these but Mommy," said Beth, looking troubled. "It's all right, dear, and a very pretty idea. Quite sensible too, for no one can ever mistake now. It will please her very much, I know," said Meg, with a frown for Jo and a smile for Beth. "There's Mother. Hide the basket quick," cried Joe as the door slammed and steps sounded in the hall. Amy came in hastily and looked rather abashed when she saw her sisters all waiting for her. "Where have you been and what are you hiding behind you?" asked Meg, surprised to see by her hood and cloak that lazy Amy had been out so early. "Don't laugh at me, Joe. I didn't mean anyone should know till the time came. I only meant to change the little bottle for a big one, and I gave all my money to get it, and I'm truly trying not to be selfish anymore." As she spoke, Amy showed the handsome flask which replaced the cheap one, and looked so earnest and humbled in a little effort to forget herself that Meg hugged her on the spot, and Joe pronounced her a trump, while Beth ran to the window and picked her finest rose to ornament the stately bottle. "You see, I felt ashamed of my present after reading and talking about being good this morning. So I ran round the corner and changed it the minute I was up, and I'm so glad, for mine is the handsomest now." Another bang of the street door sent the basket under the sofa, and the girls to the table, eager for breakfast. "Merry Christmas, Mommy. Many of them. Thank you for our books." "We read some and mean to every day," they all cried in chorus. "Merry Christmas, little daughters. I'm glad you began at once and hope you will keep up. But I want to say one word before we sit down. Not far away from here lies a poor woman with a little newborn baby. 6 children are huddled into one bed to keep from freezing, for they have no fire. There is nothing to eat over there, and the eldest boy came to tell me they were suffering hunger and cold. My girls, will you give them your breakfast as a Christmas present?" They were all unusually hungry, having waited nearly an hour, and for a minute no one spoke. Only a minute, for Joe exclaimed impetuously, "I'm so glad you came before we began." "May I go and help carry the things to the poor little children?" asked Beth eagerly. "I shall take the cream and the muffins," added Amy, heroically, giving up the article she most liked. Meg was already covering the buckwheats and piling the bread into one big plate. "I thought you'd do it," said Mrs. March, smiling as if satisfied. "You shall all go and help me, and then we come back, we'll have bread and milk for breakfast and make it up at dinner time." They were soon ready, and the procession set out. Fortunately, it was early, and they went through the back streets so few people saw them, and no one laughed at the queer party. A poor, bare, miserable room it was, with broken windows, no fire, ragged bedclothes, a sick mother, a wailing baby, and a group of pale, hungry children cuddled under one old quilt trying to keep warm. How the big eyes stared and the blue lips smiled as the girls went in. "Ach, mein Gott, it is good angels come to us," said the poor woman, crying for joy. "Funny angels in hoods and mittens," said Joe, and set them to laughing. In a few minutes, it really did seem as if kind spirits had been at work here. Hannah, who had carried wood, made a fire and stopped up the broken panes with old hats and her own cloak. Mrs. March gave the mother tea and gruel and comforted her with the promises of help, while she dressed the little baby as tenderly as if it had been her own. The girls meantime spread the table, set the children around the fire, and fed them like so many hungry birds, laughing, talking, and trying to understand the funny, broken English. "Das ist gut, die Engelkinder," cried the poor things as they ate and warmed their purple hands at the comfortable blaze. The girls had never been called angel children before, and thought it very agreeable, especially Jo, who had been considered a Sancho ever since she was born. That was a very happy breakfast, though they didn't get any of it. And when they went away, leaving comfort behind, I think there were not in all the city 4 merrier people than the hungry little girls who gave away their breakfasts and contented themselves with bread and milk on Christmas morning. "That's loving our neighbours better than ourselves, and I like it," said Meg, as they set out the presents while their mother was upstairs collecting clothes for the poor Hummels. Not a very splendid show, but there was a great deal of love done up in the few little bundles, and the tall vase of red roses, white chrysanthemums, and trailing vines which stood in the middle gave quite an elegant air to the table. "She's coming. Strike up, Beth. Open the door, Amy. 3 cheers for Mommy," cried Joe, prancing about while Meg went to conduct Mother to the seat of honor. Beth played her gayest march, Amy threw open the door, and Meg enacted escort with great dignity. Mrs. March was both surprised and touched, and smiled with her eyes full as she examined her presents and read the little notes which accompanied them. The slippers went on at once, a new handkerchief was slipped into her pocket, well scented with Amy's cologne. The rose was fastened in her bosom, and the nice gloves were pronounced a perfect fit. There was a good deal of laughing and kissing and explaining in that simple, loving fashion which makes these home festivals so pleasant at the time, so sweet to remember long afterwards. And then all fell to work. The morning charities and ceremonies took so much time that the rest of the day was devoted to preparations for the evening festivities. Being still too young to go often to the theatre and not rich enough to afford any great outlay for private performances, the girls put their wits to work, and necessity being the mother of invention, made whatever they needed. Very clever were some of their productions: pasteboard guitars, antique lamps made of old-fashioned butter boats covered with silver paper, gorgeous robes of old cotton glittering with tin spangles from a pickle factory, and armor covered with the same useful diamond-shaped bits left in sheets when the lids of preserved pots were cut out. The big chamber was the scene of many innocent revels. No gentlemen were admitted, so Joe played male parts to her heart's content and took immense satisfaction in a pair of russet leather boots given her by a friend, who knew a lady who knew an actor. These boots, an old foil, and a slashed doublet, once used by an artist for some picture, were Joe's chief treasures, and appeared on all occasions. The smallness of the company made it necessary for the two principal actors to take several parts apiece, and they certainly deserved some credit for the hard work they did in learning 3 or 4 different parts, whisking in and out of various costumes and managing the stage besides. It was an excellent drill for their memories, a harmless amusement, and employed many hours which otherwise would have been idle, lonely, or spent in less profitable society. On Christmas night, a dozen girls piled into the bed, which was the dress circle, and sat before the blue and yellow chintz curtains in a most flattering state of expectancy. There was a good deal of rustling and whispering behind the curtains, a trifle of lamp smoke, and an occasional giggle from Amy, who was apt to get hysterical in the excitement of the moment. Presently a bell sounded, and the curtains flew apart, and the operatic tragedy began. A gloomy wood, according to the one playbill, was represented by a few shrubs in pots, green baize on the floor, and a cave in the distance. This cave was made with clothes horse for a roof, bureaus for walls, and in it was a small furnace in full blast, with a black pot on it and an old witch bending over it. The stage was dark, and the glow of the furnace had a fine effect, especially as real steam issued from the kettle when the witch took off the cover. A moment was allowed for the first thrill to subside, then Hugo, the villain, walked in with a clanking sword at his side, a slouched hat, black beard, mysterious cloak, and the boots. After pacing to and fro in much agitation, he struck his forehead and burst out in a wild strain, singing of his hatred for Roderico, his love for Zara, and his pleasing resolution to kill the one and win the other. The gruff tones of Hugo's voice, with an occasional shout when his feelings overcame him, were very impressive, and the audience applauded the moment he paused for breath. Bowing with the air of one accustomed to public praise, he stole to the cavern and ordered Hagar to come forth with the commanding, "What ho, minion, I need thee." Out came Meg with a grey horsehair hanging about her face, a red and black robe, a staff, and cabalistic signs upon her cloak. Hugo demanded a potion to make Zara adore him and one to destroy Rodrigo. Hagar, in a fine dramatic melody, promised both and proceeded to call up the spirit who would bring the love philter. Hither, hither, from thy home, airy sprite, I bid thee come. Born of roses, fed on dew, charms and potions canst thou brew. Bring me here with elfin speed the fragrant philter which I need. Make it sweet and swift and strong. Spirit, answer now my song. A soft strain of music sounded, and then at the back of the cave appeared a little figure in cloudy white with glittering wings, golden hair and a garland of roses on its head. Waving a wand, it sang, Hither I come from my airy home, afar in the silver moon. Take the magic spell and use it well, or its power will vanish soon. And dropping a small gilded bottle at the witch's feet, the spirit vanished. Another chant from Hagar produced another apparition. Not a lovely one, for with a bang an ugly black imp appeared, and having croaked a reply, tossed a dark bottle at Hugo, and disappeared with a mocking laugh. Having warbled his thanks and put the potions in his boots, Hugo departed, and Hagar informed the audience that as he had killed a few of her friends in times past, she had cursed him and intends to thwart his plans and be revenged on him. Then the curtain fell and the audience reposed and ate candy while discussing the merits of the play. A good deal of hammering went on before the curtain rose again, but when it became evident what a masterpiece of stage carpentry had been got up, no one murmured at the delay. It was truly superb. A tower rose to the ceiling. Halfway up appeared a window with a lamp burning in it, and behind the white curtain appeared Zara in a lovely blue and silver dress, waiting for Rodrigo. He came in gorgeous array with plumed cap, red cloak, chestnut lovelocks, a guitar, and the boots, of course. Kneeling at the foot of the tower, he sang a serenade in melting tones. Zara replied, and after a musical dialogue, consented to fly. Then came the grand effect of the play. Rodrigo produced a rope ladder with 5 steps to it, threw up one end and invited Zara to descend. Timidly, she crept from a lattice and put a hand on Rodrigo's shoulder, and was about to leap gracefully down when, alas, alas for Zara, she forgot her train. Caught in the window, the tower tottered, leaned forward, fell with a crash, and buried the unhappy lovers in the ruins. A universal shriek arose as the russet boots waved wildly from the wreck, and a golden head emerged, exclaiming, "I told you so! I told you so!" With wonderful presence of mind, Don Pedro, the cruel sire, rushed in, dragged out his daughter with a hasty aside. "Don't laugh, act as if it was all right," and ordering Rodrigo up, banished him from the kingdom with wrath and scorn. Though decidedly shaken by the fall from the tower upon him, Rodrigo defied the old gentleman and refused to stir. This dauntless example fired Zara. She also defied her sire, and he ordered them both to the deepest dungeons of the castle. A stout little retainer came in with chains and led them away, looking very much frightened and evidently forgetting the speech he ought to have made. The third act was a castle hall, and here Hagar appeared, having come to free the lovers and finish Hugo. She hears him coming and hides, sees him put the potions into the 2 cups of wine, and bid the timid little servant, "Bear them to the captives in their cells and tell them I shall come anon." The servant takes Hugo aside to tell him something, and Hagar changes the cups for 2 others, which are harmless. Fernandino, the minion, carries them away, and Hagar puts the cup which holds the poison meant for Rodrigo. Hugo, getting thirsty after a long warble, drinks it, loses his wits, and after a good deal of clutching and stamping, falls flat and dies, while Hagar informs him of what she has done in a song of exquisite power and melody. This was a truly thrilling scene, though some persons might have thought that the sudden tumbling down of the quantity of long red hair rather marred the effect of the villain's death. He was called before the curtain, and with great prosperity appeared, leading Hagar, whose singing was considered more wonderful than all the rest of the performance put together. Act 4 displayed the despairing Rodrigo on the point of stabbing himself because he had been told that Zara had deserted him. Just as the dagger is at his heart, a lovely song is sung under his window, informing him that Zara is true but in danger, and he can save her if he will. A key is thrown in and unlocks the door, and in a spasm of rapture, he tears off his chains and rushes away to find and rescue his lady love. Act 5 opened with a stormy scene between Zara and Don Pedro. He wishes her to go to a convent, but she won't hear of it, and after a touching appeal is about to faint when Rodrigo dashes in and demands her hand. Don Pedro refuses because he is not rich. They shout and gesticulate tremendously but cannot agree, and Rodrigo is about to bear away the exhausted Zara when the timid servant enters with a letter and a bag from Hagar, who has mysteriously disappeared. The latter informs the party that she bequeaths untold wealth to the young pair, and an awful doom to Don Pedro if he doesn't make them happy. The bag is opened and several quarts of tin money shower upon their stage until it is quite glorified with glitter. This entirely softens the stern sire. He consents without a murmur. All join in a joyful chorus, and the curtain falls upon the lovers kneeling to receive Don Pedro's blessing, in attitudes of the most romantic grace. Tumultuous applause followed, but received an unexpected check, for the cot bed on which the dress circle was built suddenly shut up and extinguished the enthusiastic audience. Rodrigo and Don Pedro flew to the rescue, and all were taken out unhurt, although many were speechless with laughter. The excitement had hardly subsided when Hannah appeared, with Mrs. March's compliments, and would the ladies walk down to supper. This was a surprise even to the actors, and when they saw the table they looked at one another in rapturous amazement. It was like Mommy to set up a little treat for them, but anything so fine as this was unheard of since the departed days of plenty. There was ice cream, actually 2 dishes of it, pink and white, and cake and fruit and distracting French bonbons, and in the middle of the table, 4 great bouquets of hothouse flowers. It quite took their breath away, and they stared first at the table and then at their mother, who looked as if she enjoyed it immensely. "Is it fairies?" asked Amy. "Santa Claus," said Beth. "Mother did it," and Meg smiled her sweetest in spite of her grey beard and white eyebrows. "Aunt March had a good fit and sent the supper," cried Joe with a sudden inspiration. "All wrong. Old Mr. Lawrence sent it," replied Mrs. March. "The Lawrence boy's grandfather? What in the world put such a thing into his head? We don't know him," exclaimed Meg. "Hannah told one of his servants about your breakfast party. He's an odd old gentleman, but that pleased him. He knew my father years ago, and he sent me a polite note this afternoon, saying he hoped I would allow him to express his friendly feeling toward my children by sending them a few trifles in honor of the day. I could not refuse, and so you have a little feast at night to make up for the bread and milk breakfast." "That boy put it into his head, I know he did. He's a capital fellow, and I wish we could get acquainted. He looks as if he'd like to know us, but he's bashful, and Meg is so prim she won't let me speak to him when we pass," said Joe, as the plates went around and the ice began to melt of sight with O's and R's of satisfaction. "You mean the people who live in the big house next door, don't you?" asked one of the girls. "My mother knows old Mr. Lawrence, but says he's very proud and doesn't like to mix with his neighbors. He keeps his grandson shut up when he isn't riding or walking with his tutor and makes him study very hard. We invited him to our party, but he didn't come. Mother says he's very nice, though he never speaks to us girls. Our cat ran away once and he brought her back, and we talked over the fence and were getting on capitally, all about cricket and so on, when he saw Meg coming and walked off. I mean to know him some day, for he needs fun, I'm sure he does," said Joe decidedly. "I like his manners, and he looks like a little gentleman, so I've no objection to your knowing him, if a proper opportunity comes. He brought the flowers himself, and I should have asked him in, if I'd been sure of what was going on upstairs. He looked so wistful as he went away, hearing the frolic, and evidently having none of his own." "It's a mercy you didn't," laughed Joe. looking at her boots. But we'll have another play sometime that he can see. Perhaps he'll help act. Wouldn't that be jolly? I've never had such a fine bouquet before. How pretty it is. And Meg examined her flowers with great interest. They are lovely, but Beth's roses are sweeter to me, said Mrs. March, smelling the half-dead posy in her belt. Beth nestled up to her and whispered softly, I wish I could send my bunch to Father. I'm afraid he isn't having a Merry Christmas as we are. And that's it for tonight. If you would like to pick this up again and on your own, Little Women is found on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. And there is a new movie version of it out at the moment, which I haven't gotten to see, but I've heard it's very excellent. So if that's available to you, maybe check it out. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Désert by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.